Welcome to Financial Clarity, the podcast dedicated to helping service-based small business owners achieve financial success. Join us as we demystify financial concepts, get practical tips from seasoned entrepreneurs, and discover strategies to increase profit and value. Hannah Smolinski here. I'm the host of the Financial Clarity podcast, where I connect successful entrepreneurs, financial experts, and leaders in the small business sphere. Some past guests include Louise Brogan, a LinkedIn expert for professional services companies, Jeff Grant, a lawyer, a New York lawyer who went to jail for SBA fraud. If you want to check out those episodes, please take a look at our past episodes that we have. Today, I have Dr. Jeremy Wise of Rise 25, who has done thousands of interviews with successful entrepreneurs and CEOs, and we have flipped the script today, and he will actually be interviewing me. So stay tuned for that. Before we do that, I have a message from today's sponsor. Today's episode is brought to you by my company, Clara CFO Group. Clara CFO is dedicated to providing financial clarity and profit maximizing solutions to small businesses. The team at Clara CFO are seasoned accounting professionals with a heart for small business. We help growth-minded entrepreneurs thrive through fractional CFO services and financial education. Whether you're grappling with hiring decisions, profit margin concerns, or ambitious growth plans, Clara CFO provides insights, recommendations, and a clear financial roadmap to achieve your goals. To learn more about Clara CFO Group, you can check us out at our website at claracfo.com, or you can just email me directly at hannah@claracfo.com.
Hannah, I thank you. Thanks for having me. And I have to check out the Jeff Grant episode. That sounds great.
Very interesting. I've actually interviewed him twice, once on the other YouTube channel and then now on the podcast. And not only is his story fascinating, but he also just has really amazing insights from his life lessons learned from his experiences.
So I want to talk about your insights. You mentioned a couple things and, grappling with hiring decisions, business owners are always thinking about that, profit margin concerns, ambitious growth plans and recommendations, and having a clear financial roadmap. So we're going to discuss those, but just start off talking a little bit about Clara CFO and what you do.
Yeah, so we are a fractional virtual CFO company. So we'll break down some of those words because that, and also even CFO. So CFO is Chief Financial Officer. So lots of large companies have a full-time CFO, somebody who is advising the CEO directly. That's the person who's got the financial hat on when it comes to strategic decisions. But what we find is with smaller companies, a lot of times people don't need a full-time CFO until they get to, 30, 50, even $100 million, kind of depending on the complexity of the business. So what we've identified is that a lot of businesses can do really well if they have sort of this fractional leadership, and fractional meaning like you don't need a full-time person. You could potentially have somebody who comes in maybe like one day a week, or even just has you basically have a little bit of their brain associated to your business. So it can look like a certain amount of hours, or it can just look like a certain amount of services that are being provided to these companies. So we specialize in businesses that are usually between 1 million in annual revenue to around 20 to 25 million in annual revenue. That's a really sweet spot for fractional leadership like this. And we help people make those, difficult and sometimes complicated financial decisions for their business. We're not making the decisions for them, but we help support them when they're trying to figure out what is the best thing to do next and how to make the best decisions.
What made you start Clara CFO?
I was actually working for a small engineering firm at the time when the idea for Clara CFO kind of came into my head. It was called something different when I first started the business, but I think that happens to us a lot of times. We rebrand along the way. But I had noticed that this engineering firm that I was working with, the business owner, he had been in business for 30 plus years, and he had been running, his business had scaled up, it had scaled down. But one thing that I recognized was that he didn't have some of the really core foundational financial, just kind of knowledge to be able to make certain strategic decisions. For example, like when can we afford to hire a, high paid employee. And so one thing that we did on a regular basis was work through, for example, cash flow forecasting. And what I noticed is that my time at my job there, I really enjoyed doing those like financial projections, having those strategic conversations with the business owner, and also, helping him be more informed and be clearer about what was happening. And I just realized that's the part I loved about my job more than anything else. And so I said, maybe if this business owner who's been doing this for so long needs help in it, maybe some other small business owners might also need some help with this. So that's kind of where the idea of the business came from.
So let's talk a little bit. You said cash flow forecasting is a critical piece, and you learn
Mhm.
all, business can learn a lot from that. What are some things people should think about when they're thinking of the cash flow forecasting, and maybe big mistakes they make?
I mean, the biggest mistake is just not doing it at all. And I'd say that's the number one. A lot of times people kind of have an idea, maybe even trying to keep it all in their head, like, hey, I know this, $25,000 check is coming in, should be by next week, maybe that should be there before payroll goes out. I think that's a lot of how people do it, maybe even just obsessively checking their bank account all the time. I've heard multiple stories from business owners that say they roll over in the morning, look at their phone, and the first thing they open up is their bank account, their online banking, so they can look and see what's there. Um, and I think there's a better way to do it that kind of takes the stress off. And also, like, you can be informed and knowing, like, we all can expect a certain amount of things in our business. We can expect what payroll is going to be to a large extent. We can expect, some sort of sense of where we think sales might be. We can expect what our rent payment's going to be. So I think the biggest thing is just really trying to put your best foot forward and trying to understand, like, what could be affecting your cash, and then creating a discipline inside the business. If it's not the business owner, somebody in the business is doing this, where you can forecast cash regularly.
You mentioned a couple, I think, pain points for business owners, the hiring decisions, the profit margins, growth plan. Let's start with the hiring decision. When someone comes to you like, I'm not sure, am I ready for this hire? What are some of the questions you're getting from business owners about hiring decisions? And I'd love to hear kind of your decision tree on how you think about it.
Yeah, I mean, I just had a conversation earlier today with actually just a friend who she's really just been hesitant to hire because she says, "Wow, it's expensive, and I don't know if I can afford it." And that's the first thing that's come up. But what we were talking about, what the conversation really went to, was more like she can't afford not to. And where it kind of this happens a lot of times where we have to look at like everything else that's happening in the business. A lot of times business owners are super bogged down with everything that they have to do. And it starts to get to the point where you are starting to run into what we call opportunity cost. That the business owner is doing tasks that really maybe a $25 an hour person could do, or a $50,000 a year person could be doing, but they're doing that stuff instead of doing the really big ticket, high value things that they should be doing. So we talk about opportunity cost a lot with our clients, and usually what that ends up in is we are encouraging them to hire, strategically, do it the right way, offer the right salary, get the right funding for it. Don't do it if we don't have a funding plan for it. But what we usually prove it out to be is that hiring actually can usually prove itself out to be a financially stable decision if we do it thoughtfully.
I mean, I think a lot of times it comes down to you give people a clear picture of their financials so they can make a decision. Like you were
Mm.
saying, do you find often just people don't have a clue and that scares them?
Yeah. And, sometimes it's just putting numbers down and really getting a good sense. Somebody will say, hey, I want to hire a salesperson, but they have no idea what a salesperson should cost. And they have no idea what, employee benefits might look like if they're going to offer benefits. They have no idea what employee taxes look like. So we have actually an internal tool that we use, whether it's hourly or it's salary, where we can plug in the numbers of, let's say we're going to hire somebody for $50,000 a year, but maybe they're also going to earn, a percentage commission. Let's factor that in. What are the taxes going to be like on that? What is the state taxes going to be like on that? And then maybe what are the other things you don't think about that also are going to happen, like other costs that might be associated? Maybe you need to buy a laptop for that person. Maybe you need to make sure that they come to the annual retreat every year, which is an extra $5,000 of travel expense. Maybe it's employee benefits or retirement contribution. We have this thing that we put together. It's called our cost of hiring worksheet. And so we can give them a really clear picture of like, this is what the total cost is, but also this is the monthly cost, because a lot of times employees will start paying themselves off over time, but it's not like you have to have their full annual salary up front at the very, very beginning of a hire.
I want to talk about profit margin because when you list those things, I imagine people come in two camps. One is like, it's almost paralyzing sometimes to make a hiring decision without all the data. And some people, there's some probably visionary entrepreneurs, like we just need to hire and they don't think through all of those, as you say those things. I'm like, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah. And that can cut into the profit margin. So what are people asking you around the profit margin concerns and how do you think through that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the questions will be things like, well, how much should this person be bringing in if I hire somebody? So, like, we work with a lot of consulting firms. So, usually when you hire in somebody, they will be fairly immediately billable. Or maybe you feel the need to hire because you actually have billable work that needs to come in. So, just kind of like an idea that we like to put into our clients' minds is that our labor should be producing, should be efficient. When we hire someone, we should figure out how to make them efficient into earning money. So even like an admin staff, it should be efficient because it's freeing up some other time somewhere else to make money. So we use this terminology called the labor efficiency ratio. It's labor efficiency. It could be labor productivity. And it comes from Greg Crabtree's book, Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. Have you met Greg, Jeremy? Okay.
I've seen him speak
Yes.
once, and it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah. So he's really just very knowledgeable in the small business space because the book is really great. So definitely for anybody who wants to kind of lean more into that, definitely read it. But his concept is that like every dollar of labor should be producing $2 of gross margin. So we want our team to be productive. Now that might mean adding an admin person, might mean that your, maybe direct client service professionals are actually able to serve more hours. So the admin person, even though they might not be billable directly to a project, they should be making everybody else a little bit more efficient by taking off things that they shouldn't be doing off of their plate. And that drops to the bottom line. When you start having that labor working like that, it will increase profitability.
You mentioned consulting firms. What other types of companies do you tend to help?
Yeah, we work with a lot of B2B professional services. So, marketing agencies, communication agencies, diversity, equity, inclusion consultants, education consultants. We work with engineering firms, architects, all sorts of professional services
So
like
we've
that B2B.
hiring decisions,
Mhm.
profit margins people ask you about, and then there's probably companies that say we want to grow. What do we do? What are some of the questions they're coming to you with around growth?
Yeah, I mean, growth is inherently, I guess it can feel complex sometimes just because it feel there a lot of times there's sort of this like chicken and egg problem. It's like you either staff up to be prepared for growth or you get all the clients and then you have to find your staff. And so there's a lot of timing that happens with growth. I mean, we've definitely helped a number of clients as they're planning for like a new contract that they've never had one the size that they've had before. So we've helped them really think about like what is their internal capacity, what can they handle, how many people do they really need to hire to fit that demand, and then we've also on the other side worked with people who are, maybe they need to get the people before they bring in the work. And so in that sense, then we have to think about, okay, how much cash, how much runway do you need? Do you have the debt or the financing that you really need? I mean, we work with a lot of organic growth companies, ones that aren't going out for angel investing, and they're not venture backed or anything like that. So, this is people trying to grow their businesses organically. So a lot of times that'll mean, how do we get some bank financing or some other type of loan that will help them get to what they need in order to achieve that next level of growth.
You were talking about the cost of hiring worksheet, and I'm just wondering, maybe talk a little bit about that, and then what other internal resources that you have, because you mentioned the calculator. What other worksheets or things do you kind of go over with clients?
Yeah, I mean, over the years, we've built a number of different tools. So we have a cash flow forecasting tool, for example, that we used to use with clients. Now we make that as a free download available on our website, because it's can be helpful to anybody. Our cash flow forecasting that we use now, we use with the software that we're using for all of our clients. That's part of our deliverable to the clients. They've taken that out of Excel and put it into the software, but um, cost of hiring, we just pull that out kind of as needed. It's actually available on our website too for anybody to be able to download. Um,
Where can people
but
find it? So they can go to claracfo.com, and is there a certain place
yeah,
on the website?
I want to say it's under resources. I
Okay.
might have to look at my website and find it.
So there's a
Um,
financial resources tab
yes,
at the top, and then there's a worksheets and calculators.
yes.
Got it.
We also do classes and workshops and things, but we do have some options there for people. I mean, we have like a QuickBooks optimization checklist that's available for people, and then we have things like standard chart of accounts downloads. You'd be surprised how many chart of accounts I see when I get into people's uh, QuickBooks online, and the chart of accounts is quite disorganized and messy. So we're trying to make resources that will help make people's lives a little bit easier, and also like demystify the financial process a little bit, and give some sort of standard. In small businesses, we don't have the standards that like really large businesses have. They have GAAP accounting standards, and if you're public, you have to, report SEC reporting, and there's all these rules around it. But when it comes to small businesses, some of like the nitty gritty of how to do this stuff is never really explicit. So that's what we're trying to do with like the YouTube channel, and then also some of our resources online.
I want to talk about why small business in a second, but if you're looking at the video part of this, you can see we're at the Clara CFO. You can go to financial resources, you click on worksheets and calculators, and here are some of the options here. You can see the free cash flow forecast right here, which has been, and there's a bunch of free tools actually.
Oh yeah, I
CBO
forgot everything we
optimization
had.
checklist. We have a KPI worksheet. You can check out what's been one of the favorites. What's a fan favorite on this page?
I would say probably the cash flow, and when the EIDL loans were going out, the EIDL amortization schedule that was down there, um, that was a really big one too. Actually, people are still downloading that fairly often, and the QuickBooks optimization checklist is also,
Yeah,
um,
people can check out those. Those are free,
yeah.
actually.
Mhm.
Who doesn't like free? Talk about why small business? Like you could probably go out and help large enterprises if you wanted to.
Mhm. Um, I I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur. I think understanding, like, seeing his, he's probably one of the smartest people I know. And, still seeing that, like, even somebody who is incredibly intelligent can still struggle sometimes with, the finance side of the business. To me, I'm like, I don't understand how that could even be possible necessarily, but it's a different language sometimes to people. And then it's also, um, it can seem scary if you're not really well versed in it. So I feel like I just kind of have a heart for small businesses because I grew up seeing how much work goes into developing something from scratch. the risk that small business owners are putting themselves out there for. I mean, we're, self-employed, everything's relying on us, our health insurance, our retirement, everything. And I just want to see those businesses that are taking those really brave and strategic and, risky steps, that they can see the financial gain of it too. Because, usually there's that concept of risk and reward. But I also see a lot of small businesses taking huge risks and doing this thing on their own and, following their dreams, but then it never has a financial payout. So I kind of want to flip that script.
What did your dad do?
He's an engineer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So talk about, it seems like you kind of fit the needs of the business, what they need. What are some of the services that you offer?
Yeah, we do fit the needs of the business, but we've also become like pretty prescriptive in like we have worked with enough businesses that we know what they need. Where I think a lot of times people know they need help, but they aren't really exactly sure what they need. So we've identified that all small businesses need to have like a very clear budget. Like a lot of small businesses are not budgeting. If they are budgeting, it's like a very kind of surface level process. So we do that with them. We also make sure that their financials are clean, that the information coming in is accurate. A lot of times we have kind of the garbage in, garbage out principle. If you can't trust the information in your financials, what good is that for us? So
Can't make a
we want to,
decision.
yeah, we got to make sure that that information is really good. So we have a cleanup process at the beginning of our work together. We understand the business so that we can make sure we're understanding like what is the business model, what is the revenue model, how can we, help kind of. I mean, there's definitely a lot of customization when it comes to the actual conversations that we're having with clients and the strategic discussions. But when we talk about like the deliverables at the end of the day, those are pretty standardized with like a budget, a forecast, a rolling forecast every single month that gets updated with new assumptions, and then a cash flow forecast. And then we also provide KPI dashboards, both financial dashboards and operational dashboards.
Where do people typically start? Where should they start if they're like, I know I need to clean up my financials. I know I need a clear budget. I know I need these things for my business. Where should they start with you?
Yeah, I mean, we like to make sure that people are that they have, the basic bookkeeping in place. So usually people will come to us when they do have bookkeeping, but they are starting to ask their questions to their bookkeeper, or maybe they're trying to ask questions to their tax CPA, but e- either the bookkeeper is like, "Ooh, that's not for me. Like, that's not my job." Bookkeepers focus on the historicals. They don't do very well when you start asking them about the future. Um, and CPAs are usually just too bogged down in work and tax returns to answer questions in any kind of like regular cadence to actually help the business owner. So um, I think we want to make sure that they have a foundation of financials in place. We can help optimize them, but that's kind of like well, if that's not in place, like let's say they're a business and they have never had an accounting system before, we would first send them a referral to say like, hey, go get set up, get all of this done first, and then we can talk about what CFO services could look like. But they need to have financials first.
Hannah, first of all, thank you. Thanks for sharing this information. And I want to see if there's anything else we should talk about before we end. But before we do, people should check out obviously more episodes of the podcast, and they can go to claracfo.com. That's CLARA CFO.com to learn more. Is there anything else we should point out for the listeners?
I think one thing that we've been really is kind of a core value for our organization is education. So if anybody is just kind of curious about some of these concepts we've talked about today, and maybe you want to learn a little bit more, maybe, see if you can do some of this stuff by yourself, and maybe you don't need a CFO, go and check out our YouTube channel first. That's Clara CFO Group. It's at Clara CFO Group on YouTube. We have over 200 videos there, and that's been, a collection of work over the past 3.5 years, which is kind of crazy to think about. But we've done a lot of videos there on profitability. We've done videos on like improving your QuickBooks. We've done videos talking about hiring decisions and how much you should pay yourself. I mean, all of these financial concepts that aren't talked about a lot, we want to talk about them. So I think that's a really great place to start if you're kind of curious and you want to kind of dig around a little bit more. Definitely check that out.
Check that out. Check out claracfo.com. And also, Hannah is very humble. They have at this time, have over 55,000 subscribers subscribing to their content and consuming it and listening to it to help their business. So check that out as well. And Hannah, thanks for having me.
Jeremy, thank you for having me. It feels weird. You're interviewing me on my podcast, but I really appreciate it. And you've asked some great questions. Thank you.
You're the pro. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Financial Clarity Podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes to learn more about today's episode and click subscribe on your favorite podcast app.